Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me all right. We are hitting 5 o'clock p.m. Central Time, so we are going to get started in the next 30 to 40 seconds. You can just make sure everything is working on your end. You can hear us all right. If you can't hear us all right, drop us a chat in the chat box, and we can adjust our audio if we need to. But I'll be right back with you in about a minute here. Thank you all for being here. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It is 1 after 5, so we're going to go ahead and get started with tonight's presentation. Really excited to dive in here and have some really good conversations about community development and more than just the Nashville area where I'm speaking to you from, but we also have leaders from Phoenix, Arizona and Austin, Texas. Um, so without further ado, I am going to share my screen so that we can begin with a couple of housekeeping items. Hopefully you all can see this. So welcome. Thank you for being here again. We are here to discuss the role of urban planning in historical and ongoing societal injustices. My name is Ian Preston. I am the chair of the Young Professionals in Transportation Nashville chapter located in Nashville, Tennessee. This event is also brought to you by the Young Professionals in Transportation Phoenix and Austin chapters. They were kind enough to collaborate with us tonight to bring you all some really interesting conversations from some really neat experts in our field. So first of all, quick background about our organization, YPT, or Young Professionals in Transportation. We are a nonprofit non-advocate organization located in Tennessee. We are also a national organization. Most states in the U.S. have a local chapter. Not all do, but there are some that have more than one. The Tennessee one is located in Nashville. And our role basically is to bring to light urban issues and transportation-related topics in an informal setting and formal setting too, by showcasing the relevant issues going on in our communities, right? So we are sponsored by some local agencies and companies. We use those funds to put on local events. Before COVID, we had about one event per month, ranging from we all meet at a restaurant and kind of enjoy each other's company and talk about issues related to planning and transportation in our communities. They also range to more formal events, such as this one tonight, where we have a panel of experts to talk about those important issues. Of course, due to the pandemic, we've tried to do some more remote meetings and virtual options for our members in our communities. So this is one. So I hope you enjoy tonight. This is hopefully going to spur some good conversation for our attendees as well. The attendees will be muted and we will not see you, but please enter any and all questions that you have in the chat box. We will be monitoring that. And please submit those questions so that all of the attendees can see. That way we won't have double ups on questions and folks can see what's been asked and we can move on from there. So hopefully that will go well. And if it doesn't, well, we'll just go with it anyway. So I'm going to get started here with our first panelist tonight, Jessica Bueno. Jessica is the Director of Community Programs for the Phoenix Revitalization Corporation. She is a Phoenix community leader working towards strengthening the assets that make a vibrant and healthy community livable. She is passionate about small business, public education, and community development. Jessica works for the Phoenix Revitalization Corporation as their Director of Community Programs. And in this role, she helps build resident leadership capacity in low-income neighborhoods, engages residents to provide input in community development projects, and establish neighborhood groups and associations. As president of the Urban Phoenix Project, she is dedicated to leading the nonprofit organization in addressing the need for quality urban design, effective transit, and investment in public spaces. She currently enjoys serving her community in many other local leadership capacities. She is the board of directors for the Marisol Federal Credit Union. She is president of the Oakland Neighborhood Association. She is president of the Urban Phoenix Project, and she is currently the co-owner of Xanadu Coffee Company. Welcome, Jessica. Moving things to Nashville, Tennessee, Gary Gaston is the CEO of the Civic Design Center in Nashville. He serves as assistant professor of practice at the University of Tennessee Knoxville College of Architecture and Design. Gary received his Bachelor of Architecture from University of Tennessee in Knoxville and his Master's in Education and Community Development and Action from Vanderbilt University. Gary helped lead numerous planning and design efforts for the Design Center, including its visionary The Plan of Nashville, Avenues to a Great City, which was published in 2005. Gary served as executive producer of the National Endowment for the Arts funded documentary film Design Your Neighborhood, and co-authored 2 books, Moving Tennessee Forward, Models for Connecting Communities, published in 2012, and Shaping the Healthy Community, The Nashville Plan, published by the Vanderbilt University Press in 2016. Gary is a TEDx Nashville Fellow. His talk on improving public health through community design can be viewed at a link that I will provide to our attendees at the end. He received the Tau Sigma Delta Honor Society Silver Medal for extraordinary efforts to advance the field of design in the region in 2016, and was recognized as a Next American Vanguard by Next City Magazine in 2010. Gary serves on the board of directors of the District and Nashville Health Steering Committee, and he currently lives in Germantown, Tennessee with his dog Lottie. Welcome, Gary. Thank you for being with us. Next is Kelly Coleman. Kelly is a business process consultant for the City of Austin's Equity Office. She has over 18 years of equity and social justice community organizing experience, integrating media and popular education as strategies for social change. In 2008, she co-founded Vibrant Women Mama Sana Prenatal Clinic, a project of Mamas of Color Rising that provides holistic and culturally specific prenatal care, birth companions, midwifery services, prenatal fitness and nutrition services to lower income Black and Latina folks in the Austin area. In 2013, Kelly facilitated the Austin Public Health Department's community health workers training focused on health equity issues impacting Black women in Austin, Texas. She has conducted original research on the social determinants of health as they impact Black women locally. She is a member of the National Leadership Collective of Incite Women and Trans People of Color Against Violence. She has consulted with numerous national and local organizations on equity and reproductive issues, including the U.S. Midwifery Education, Regulation, and Association, MANA, a national Latina organization, University of Texas LBJ School of Public Affairs, and the Austin Women's Community Center. Kelly has 3 children and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from St. Edward's University in 2015. Welcome, Kelly. And last but certainly not least, Amanda Hasso is a program manager for Austin's Equity Office also. She works with Kelly. After serving as the Latino Community Archivist at the Austin History Center, which is a division of the Austin Public Library, in this position, it allowed her to work with communities who are barred from access to resources in many forms, building upon her goals of pursuing equitable information access and preservation of underdocumented histories and stories. She holds a Master's of Information Science from the University of Washington and a Bachelor of Arts in Communication from the University of Pennsylvania. She has experience working in labor archives, public libraries, and city government. While in graduate school, she partnered with the Northwest Immigrants' Rights Project to research, compile, and disseminate information resources for persons leaving immigration detention centers. Her research and advocacy includes sustainable practices for serving immigrant communities and undocumented persons, and exploring the powerful links between history, memory, identity, and community. Welcome to our speakers. We are going to get started here with a question for Kelly to start us off. Kelly, from your perspective, can you speak to the topic of today's discussion on the role of urban planning and societal injustice? Generally, how has urban planning impacted societal injustices both positively and negatively? I understand that's a huge question, but do the best you can, and hopefully we can have a great discussion on this first question. I'm going to quit sharing my screen now and be quiet. And Kelly, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you for inviting us here today to have this conversation, especially in such an important moment. And hopefully, it's more of a movement instead of just a moment. Um, as far as urban planning, I think that it's something that is definitely in the context of the United States, very rooted in a racist history. And our earliest land use plan in Austin forcibly removed Black folks and placed them in a specific part of town. And we know that that legacy still persists today. Um, Displacement of Black and Brown people is a typical outcome for us when only planners and developers design our cities. Amanda?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly, for starting us out. I should say that being part of the Equity Office, we're not transportation professionals per se or urban design professionals, but we do consult a lot with both our transportation department, our planning and zoning department, and so forth, and the intersections of all of those. And so one of our core values as a department is knowing and understanding the history. So really understanding how these early land use plans, redlining, racial covenants, the Highway Act, zoning for industrial use in communities of color, and then further down the line, how subsidized housing sort of came into play, and then our urban renewal programs that, you know, our POC, our BIPOC folks call urban removal, because essentially folks were kind of funneled into subsidized housing and were never given the resources to adequately return to their places of community and home. And so I think all of that's really important when you start talking about urban planning and its impact on us today. And also just in, like Kelly said, in this moment, in this movement, I think it's important to think about what built environments really are. And when our Black folks are being profiled and murdered on these streets, I mean, that's part of our built environment. And so I think really kind of shifting that focus of design and planning to a more human-centered focus is something that we like to be really intentional about when we consult with our planning departments.
Some great context, Kelly and Amanda. I appreciate that. Jessica, could you give us the context over in the Phoenix communities?
Sure. So thank you so much for, hosting this webinar today. It's a very important topic. And so, I just want to point out that urban planning, in its glory should be designing cities for people, people should work, live, and play in the community that they reside in. And so that's the essence of urban planning. But, I just want to take it back and say, it's the policy part that is really hurting our communities, right? It's like the policy that is enacted is to only benefit a certain demographic of people. So that's where that battle is like, yeah, you can have the perfect vision for urban planning, but like, how are you really going to implement it? And who are you really serving during this implementation? Who are you really creating, this city for? Who is it going to benefit? So I think, we have to, really think about the policies. We talk about like the industrial zoning policies. We talk about, what here in Phoenix, what we're experiencing is the additional dwelling units. It's only in certain areas of town. It's not in, it's not a zoning policy that is spread across the whole city. So I think it's more of the policy portion that we really need to focus on.
Very good, Jessica. Thank you for that. Gary, I do want to go to you, but we just got a question from one of our attendees. This one was for Jessica, specifically about redlining and displacement. Hannah says, can you talk about the history of redlining and displacement in the Phoenix region? What resources can we access to learn more about this history?
Sure. So I'll talk about the history of Phoenix and, the creation of the city and where the core of the city is. So like most cities, the core is downtown, but with the Phoenix development, it's, the original communities of Phoenix was along the riverbank. So that's where, people settled, and that's where life was formated. So now we see the displacement as the city grew. More people were coming to the city, and so like still in the 70s, the redlining that occurred was everything south of the railroad tracks. So it's literally everything south of downtown. Redlining, still occurring in the 70s, where in property deeds there was no allowance of people of color being able to buy property north of Van Buren, which is, south, north of downtown, but it's still like the core of the city. So that's the history of it. And we still see it today because we still have the concentrated population of public housing just south of downtown. South of the Rio, which is South Phoenix, we still see the disinvestment that is occurring in those communities. And so the resources that you can access to learn more about the history, I know there's a lot of groups that are really working on sharing that history. So you have like Mass Liberation AZ that is really working on these type of resources, Bullet in Action. So yeah, that's kind of where I would turn to those organizations to help find the resources.
Great, thank you for that. And thank you, Hannah, for your question. A reminder to our attendees, feel free to put any questions in that chat box to all panelists so that we can see. Thank you. I can turn it over to Gary. Gary, some perspective from your role in Nashville.
I think we can all agree of the really dark past of urban planning and development and design in cities all across the country on negatively impacting people and minorities and people that couldn't really obstruct some decisions that were being made for them from the top down. We could we'll reflect on other responses. I mean, very similar historical context here in Nashville of those types of things happening. And still, obviously, the impacts of that impacting people today and carrying forward. What I think in Nashville happened, and I saw, I studied architecture as my background, so urban planning has come more recent in my career, urban planning and community engagement. But there was a movement here in Nashville that began in the mid 90s, and it was a protest to a transportation related project that came about. And that really galvanized our community to begin to step out and oppose it, which is what eventually led to the creation of the organization I work for, the Civic Design Center. And the mission of the Design Center is, I think, probably one of the positive aspects of urban planning that we've seen come about in the last 20 years is the participatory citizen-based model, where you actively approach and engage community members in the vision for their communities and reflect that in the plans that are happening, and engage and be a part of the conversation and process, which was not done historically, which is, many of the reasons why things happened in the past. I'll just say, I think what we're experiencing now is that while those intentions may have been good to engage community members, oftentimes policies were not enacted that protected the communities in which those visions were established. And as people have really flocked back to the city, particularly here in Nashville over the last 15 to 10 years, we've seen the displacement that's come from that because there were not really protections in place to really support the people that came out and shared their vision for what they wanted to see happen. So I do also agree that with everything that's happening in the movement and Black Lives Matter and social justice and equity as the core of the conversation, that these decisions and policies that were never followed up on, we can, you know, as a country can move forward with that to try to make a better future.
Great, agreed. I love what all of you guys are saying. I thought that was a really, really helpful background on history and sort of how design is shaped, and also about how policy and the role that policy plays is incredibly important to our history too. So thank you for that. We just got another question from an attendee. Christopher asks, how can we get more involved as young professionals to support these policies? That is a great question, Christopher. In fact, it's so good. It was actually on my list of questions to our panelists. So why don't we just take that away as best we can? Perhaps Kelly, would you like to, you and Amanda from the Austin standpoint, like to take that? The question was, how can we get more involved as young professionals to support these policies?
Do you want to go first, Amanda?
What?
Go ahead. I'll go after you.
Okay. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of ways. I think it's really important in whichever career track we're in or whatever industries to really take the leadership of people who are most directly impacted in our communities. And so pushing for policy change, I think, of course, really occurs inside and outside. So inside government organizations or you know, private sector, but it also takes community on the outside to really push for that change. And so I think part of that means you need to have those relationships with folks in the community to really build those out. And so that's sort of, it's vague and it's not specific to an exact city, but I know here for us, in the equity office, there's so much distrust of city government and municipal government, all levels of government really. But I think for us, it's so incredibly important that we amplify the voices of folks in our community who are suffering the worst outcomes due to planning decisions.
I'm so glad that folks want to get involved and want to support policy. And I agree with Jessica around the policy piece. It is important, but it's also important because we can't just leave. Whenever we create policy, you can't just walk away after that, right? Like, because as someone who's organized and been able to change policy in other spaces, the outcome wasn't what we needed it to be when the rubber met the road. Does that make sense? So really trying to make sure that we visualize and can imagine what we want to see, right? And work our way backwards. Does that make sense? And the way that you do that is just how Amanda spoke on. And I feel like what everyone on the panel is saying is starting and centering the people who are most directly impacted, who've been having negative outcomes, and that's queer, trans, Black, Indigenous, people of color, right? Those are the people we're talking about, to be real specific. Those folks are the most disproportionately impacted around income and wealth. Those are the folks most directly impacted by health issues. Those are the folks most directly impacted by housing issues, right? And so if we're able to center any sort of design around those folks and have those folks decide what the problem is we're fixing, you know, we'll have different outcomes. I also think that, and this is Austin, the level of gentrification that we have faced, we were the only city growing at the rate we were, losing our Black population. El Paso was getting Black folks to come live there and we weren't, right? And so how can we be the best place to live in the United States, because that's what they said in the magazines, right? And still have the outcomes that we have for people of color? Is that a related thing, right? Are we the best place to live because we have these impacts for people of color? Like, what's that about? And I really think that that sometimes there's this sort of, and forgive me, the way that I frame this might be rough, but there's like this sort of neoliberal weirdness that comes with some of this stuff, because we work a lot with some of the urban planners in the city, and it's like taking theory, you know, that they've learned in school and how they've learned to do things and wanting to implement, right, but not having the context. You're not coming into something out of a black hole. There's been years and years, people's blood in the soil, right, from the very beginning. And just being real clear about, when you do this work, who are the people you're accountable to? Is it your boss, or is it the people in that community, you know, that are supposed to benefit? I think those are like the critical questions we need to be asking ourselves when we do this kind of work.
Absolutely right there, Kelly and Amanda. Thank you for that. And Kelly, to your point about uh, you know, theory-based planning, I think a lot of folks on this call right now can remember when they were in school, and you know, there is an important context that you need with that, but it's not the full picture, you know. And so I think the historical part of it is as important as anything else. So I totally agree. Jessica, some thoughts on your end?
Yes, thank you for handing that over to me, because right to Kelly's point, and that's why I really feel like I sit in a unique position, because like Urban Phoenix Project, we're very much like, in theory, how would this city be designed? And then my work with Phoenix Revitalization, that's the implementation, and who it's impacting is low income communities. And so, you know, exactly to your point of the policy is like, what is the end result that we want in our policy to help those that are mostly impacted by gentrification, by displacement, by the policy itself, but how can we accommodate that policy to strengthen our assets? Our assets are our people. Very much so, gentrification is that they want to take our culture and say, here, we have this new idea about culture. It's like, no, it's been here, it's us. And now that you want to invest in our neighborhoods and displace us while you're at it, it's very much so like, think of the end result, in which is it's people. It's people is what makes the community. It's what's keeping small businesses in business. I mean, even with COVID right now, Phoenix, I mean, we thrive, our economy thrives on tourism, and that did not happen this season. So what did we have to rely on? We had to rely on the people that were gonna keep the mom and pop shops open, the people that are running this city. It's not the visitors, it's the people that are here. So how do we keep designing these cities for the people?
I think you're totally spot on, all of you. Gary, I know we're experiencing some of that in the Nashville communities too. Your thoughts from our local perspective?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think just engaging in your city, making sure that you understand the past and the history is absolutely critical to successfully getting involved in engagement that can make change that can positively impact people that have experienced the most negative side of that. And so if you really pay attention to the organizations in your city that are doing that type of work, engage with them. Also understanding that even your best intentions probably in some way is going to have some type of unintended consequences that you might not really ever think about. And I know that from, you know, you can look back now, and even the type of work that we do or other nonprofits that maybe in the past we thought was going to be helpful has had unintended consequences that I think have led to displacement. And so how do you work with community members doing that focused work from within to provide that assistance and support, but not going in with, like, I think designers and planners have this mentality of, and I think Kelly said this, going back and thinking that you know what's best, when that's not the approach to take. And you can use your expertise, but use it in a way that's helpful and not harmful or destructive. And so just engaging with the people that know what needs to happen, I think is one really powerful way to help them get involved.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all for that. I apologize if you see me looking down at the screen. We're getting some action in the chat box here, which is what we want to see. I'm going to hopefully get to everyone. Our next question is from Tim. Tim asks, even cities with progressive leaders must contend with laws and attitudes driven by state legislatures, often white and more rural. How can leaders and residents counter an often racist war on cities? War on cities is in quotes. This was back several minutes ago when we were talking about this, but of course, I'd open it up to maybe, Kelly, did you have an intermediate response? I'm just kind of going back in order.
So I don't know if y'all know, but Austin is constantly getting targeted by our state about the bag ordinance. They came for us. That it's a thing. It's constant, and we have some of those issues here for sure. And I think what that forces us to do is to just be better and be more creative. I think what ends up happening is that there's an opportunity, and Jessica spoke to it a little bit around the moneymaker, right? I think Austin is supposed to make tons of money projected in the next 2 years. I was just on a webinar where they were talking about that, like this ridiculous amount of wealth in the next 2 years. And it's like we take risks as a city on the things that we want to, right? Our land development code 2 times now, community has sued us. And the second time we got sued, the most recent time we got sued, there was no case law supporting the city side, right? But we still went for it. And there's other spaces where if we had money or the political will around some of these other things that we should be taking risks on and aren't, it would be different. So I feel like there's things that governments don't mind pushing back on, and then there's things where they sort of use the state as a crutch, honestly, about what they can't do because they don't want to do it and there isn't political will. Because when they want to do something, guess what? They make it happen by any means necessary. And that's just honesty. A lot of times it's because there's certain folks that are going to benefit financially from that, right? And so I always tell people, like on The Wire, follow the money and you'll figure out what's what.
Yeah, that was perfect. I don't have anything to add to that.
Well said. Sure. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Amanda. Did we have some immediate thoughts from you, Jessica, on that question? I can repeat it if you need.
Please repeat.
Sure. Even cities with progressive leaders must contend with laws and attitudes driven by state legislatures, often white and more rural. How can leaders and residents counter an often racist war on cities? Maybe we can pass to Gary if you need. Just let me know.
Well, I mean, the war on cities, I think right now what we're witnessing is that there's investment going in back to cities. So I kind of like to point out that we're having like the reverse of white flight is we have all the white coming back into the community, back to the core of downtown. So it's very much so, yeah, we're designing a city that is, for everybody, but how do we honor that there's been generations of people that didn't have that freedom and luxury of flying out to the suburbs? So it's just an interesting dilemma of the war on cities. I think I don't know, I'm kind of stuck. Sorry, I'll pass it on to Gary.
Sure, no problem. I did like what you said about that. There was the white flight, of course, decades ago, but now studies have shown that more affluent people, more white folks are moving back into cities because they want to live where everything is, and that is causing a lot of issues for many different reasons. Yeah, please, Gary.
I feel like Austin is like Nashville like 15 years in the future in some degrees to every aspect of what we're going through here. And, and a very similar political situation to considered like a very, or for Tennessee, a liberal location within this state, that anything we do is that tries to be progressive is often just cut off at the state level. So it's disheartening to have the trying, I think, at a local level to make this change happen, and then having that ability taken away from us. So yeah, it is that's the aspect of the fight against the urban areas. I think what I would say one success that we've had in Middle Tennessee is Nashville really engaging with its surrounding counties, which as Nashville's grown, those counties have also experienced exponential growth as well. And some of them are more, Nashville's very urban, then you've got suburban, but as those suburban counties grow, they're increasing in population. And then you've got the rural counties even further out in our MSA. So there was a lot of engagement from our mayors to communicate with each other and kind of make their case as a block, voting block in the state level conversations. And I think when you get those more conservative, historically conservative counties on board, then the voice for the greater good of the region, then that helps in your conversation at the state level to not like cut the efforts of the MSA off. And so I think that we have experienced some success from some of our transportation efforts and funding on that capacity. But still, again, we're going through a lot of those same instances. And again, to Jessica's point with, the war on cities now is the reverse of that. And what's really just, I think, so disheartening is these people were, as white flight happened, they were left in their neighborhoods with no support, none of the economic investment for decades. And now you've got the reverse of that coming back, and the displacement that's happening. It's so sad to me that, having gone through all that, and now it's once again happening again, but even in like more of a drastic way, because it's just with cities, the expense happening so much, it's like, where do you find a place to live? You've lived in this neighborhood for maybe 50 years, and now where would you even go? It's sad.
Yeah, that's a great point. Where do you go? And that's if you're able-bodied. A lot of these folks are disabled or experiencing other tragedies, or just don't have the means to do it, or don't and shouldn't need to, and they're having to. And thank you for those perspectives, and thank you, Tim, for that question. Panelists, I'm going to go ahead and move on. We're getting some more questions coming in here. Michael asks, and forgive me, Michael, I'm inserting some of my own punctuation in here. Michael asks, what are your positions? Are urban revitalizations happening without gentrification? Perhaps can they?
That's the question.
That question, but take it away, Kelly. Yes, please.
I don't, I look at places like Detroit and or thinking about, because our mayor says gentrification is a good thing, right? Like every condo that goes up is a good thing. And I struggle, I struggle with that. I look at different places across the country, and it depends on the perspective, right? It depends on who you're talking to and what their roots are, right? Who they belong to is really what it's about. And I think I haven't seen any of this stuff work, and that's including the folks in Minneapolis who got rid of the single family housing stuff. We're a part of this national organization, GARE, Government Alliance for Race and Equity. They do equity work with all kinds of different municipalities, and this stuff was coming up a lot. And so I haven't necessarily seen it work. Some of the transportation pieces for Austin, we have what we call the train to nowhere in our MSA. And it doesn't serve the people that, that we would like for it to have served. Still, even our bus routes are aligned with taking people of color from where they have traditionally lived and been forced to live out to white areas or out of downtown. And so I think whenever Jessica and Gary sort of talked about the suburbanization of poverty, like what does that mean if we start to have these all white cities? Gentrification, that, I think when people talk about it, they're like, oh, that's about income switch. It is, but we cannot divorce income from race. They're like this. And so I feel like I don't know that that is possible, and I don't know of anywhere where that's necessarily happening. Because even in places like DC, Chocolate City, right, Atlanta, places like New Orleans, you know, like those places, it hasn't necessarily benefited the people who have always been there.
Yeah, you make me think about like who urban revitalization was supposed to be for, because just for our using our own context, like our physical office space is in the African American Cultural Heritage District, which was the area that Black folks were forcibly moved after our first land use plan. But if you go to that area right now, we're supposed to be like celebrating heritage and culture of Black folks, but Black folks can't afford to live there anymore. And so it makes
I
me
think
think
there's
like, well,
one Black business on our corridor,
yeah,
Amanda.
there's like one Black business, and I forget his name, but a man who still lives there, an elder who still lives in the neighborhood, owns his house, and he's holding on. But so that, I think that's kind of the problem. Like if urban revitalization was never meant to serve the people who are living there already. And so that also makes me think, Kelly, about Derek Hamilton and stratification economics, and how there is actual economic return if you're when you base your designing and planning and developing around group agency, but we don't necessarily do that. And so the people with the money in our city, the white folks, like Kelly was talking about, rerouting our transportation systems to serve these folks who don't actually need these services, they still have this like strong interest in using their disproportionate wealth to maintain those public services and goods that benefit them, but they don't necessarily need them. And so that's what Derek Hamilton calls investing in the property rights of whiteness. And I think that really, I think that's at the heart of a lot of our city planning and policies, and that's how it plays out.
Great, good perspectives. Jessica, our Phoenix perspective.
Sure. So, when I think of gentrification, I think of investment coming into neighborhoods and communities. But at the same time, that investment is not for the people that are currently there. It's for those that will come. And so I think in order for, us to think about how do we keep people in their homes, how do we provide resources to higher education, higher paying jobs, like how do we accommodate those that made that place more likable and drew people in there. So, that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out here in Phoenix is we're addressing, like I said, the reverse white flight, but how do we still keep people that are here? They're on, fixed incomes. How do we help with fixed property taxes? We have, elderlies that have been living here in the city. So, I think that's a great question. How do we take that negative term of gentrification and really highlight how are we going to invest in those that are already there? But I think also what's occurring with gentrification is that you have individuals, developers, whoever that are coming in and saying like, oh my God, this place is amazing. Like, let's do this, without going to the community and be like, well, what do you actually need to help yourself contribute more to the community or to help yourself be in a better position? And that's not what we're receiving. We're just receiving like, this area could be so much better if, this area could become this if, but we are the ifs. We are why you're coming to the neighborhood. So what is going to be the investment in those people?
Great, thank you, Jessica. Great stuff, guys. Gary, from Nashville perspective.
There's ongoing conversation about gentrification, and I don't think you can have gentrification that does not result in displacement. But I think what, ideally you would want is the perfect scenario for a planner would be, how do we improve communities that benefits people that live there? I don't know that that's possible in our current situation without displacement, because that is removing obstacles that prevent capital from flowing in, and then that displacement comes. So the policies, the education, the systems have to change. And I think we've gotten to a point in this country where our systems are completely broken and there has to be really radical systemic change from top down to local level, grassroots up. And I think we're seeing that. We're at a moment in time where that has to happen. And so I saw someone in the chat box that said no one has mentioned voting, but obviously that's a fundamental aspect of making change happen, is on a long term, is voting and the organizations that are out there doing the work to get people registered and getting them to vote, because this has been such a long-term issues and policies that have led to where we are right now. I think there's things that we can do locally, but there's also there's just things that have to happen at a national level.
Can I say something real quick?
Please, Kelly. Yeah.
I like that, Gary. I also think that voting is really important, right? But it's also sort of an individual act. I think, and someone said this on a call earlier that I was on, that there's financial power, right? And then there's people power. And I think that what folks in this on this call are really pushing is like people power. And there was a question in the chat about, usually people who are directly impacted don't know about the policies and what's happening. And I think that's sometimes true. But there are folks in our communities. There's a woman here, I'm in Austin. If you haven't ever heard of her, her name is Susana Almanza, a part of an organization called Poder, who has been doing environmental justice work forever, and neighborhood work, and who is directly impacted, but knows her stuff, and has developed leadership in the neighborhoods and folks who are directly impacted for a very long time. I don't think we can overlook those folks and overlook sort of building power in places that can actually make change, because I think voting's important, and this is the piece that gets the folks we need to even have people writing policy or who get it enough to be in power, right? Like, I mean, think about who we have at the table right now. I wouldn't say that any of those folks are closely aligned with Black Lives Matter at the national level, right? Like, I think it's more complex than that, and I always feel like he said thread that needle, right? How do we make those connections? Because we need anti-racist planners, right? We need just like we need anti-racist. And when I say that, I mean, folks who understand ableism, folks who understand capitalism, folks who understand the history, people who get misogyny. Like, we need folks with those types of lenses doing the work every day, right? Because that means the approach is different. That means that whenever you go into a neighborhood, you don't see the buildings and like what this cool project could be. You see the story, you feel the culture. It's like, it's a different orientation to the land. You know what I mean? And that's, I think, what's missing is this super intellectualization of this stuff. And it almost like, sort of like the way we professionalize like social workers, around fixing problems for folks, right? Like before we had social workers, we had we would just take care of each other, right? We weren't. I'm thinking about a lot of the work that I've done has been in like around violence, interpersonal violence, women of color, stuff like that. And so when that got professionalized, it became really white, right? And now we have programs where for interpersonal violence and stuff where, you know, you have to call the police, you have to have you have to have certain things that are very sort of institutional, and take the community out. Am I making sense to y'all? I'm trying to draw a parallel, but I don't know if I'm doing a good job.
Oh, I think so. Yes.
Following? Okay. Just that, you know, I think that people have really taken the humanity out, and I know that there's folks who love this work and who are thinking really hard about it. And the way that I've seen sort of like architecture and these conversations around design and design justice come about have been really interesting to me, because it incorporates all of these principles around being human-centered and trying to create equitable outcomes for folks. And so I think that it's going to happen sooner or later, the threading of that needle.
Got it. Thanks, Kelly. I think that makes a lot of sense. And, you know, one thing to what you were saying about kind of the interconnectedness of things, you know, if we could all have our college students or even our high school students take an urban planning course, it would just kind of be a testament to how interrelated things are. You know, you can't talk about race without talking about voting, like you mentioned. And it's just really important to have the whole kind of mixing bowl right in front of you so you can really dive in. Because there's no point in talking about one thing for too long before you mention gentrification or voting or rights or other civil rights, things like that. It's very important. So thank you for that. And thank you for Michael for that question. I have an incredibly hard job here right now of sifting through our questions here. Leslie says, I like the term involving those with lived experience. I think that might have been Kelly who said that earlier. It seems to be less intimidating to policymakers than saying those who are marginalized or underserved. So I think that was a comment around 526 from our conversation earlier. So thank you for that. I'm sorry, I'm going to move on since there wasn't a specific question, but thank you, Leslie. Kalijah says, oftentimes those who are impacted most by social injustices are unaware of local policies that are affecting them due to lack of access to news and web information. How do you recommend getting those minorities involved to advocate and represent their communities if they are simply unaware? So that's a more civic engagement question, I think. We touched on a little bit, but yeah, how would we like to start with? Maybe Jessica on that one? I can repeat it also.
Sure, thank you. I think, so we have to take into consideration, we're asking a lot from these communities. We're asking them to translate what it means to live in these communities, what it means to express their lived experiences. It's exhausting. It's exhausting the same way it is for a BLM. It's exhausting to explain, you know, how dangerous it is to cross the street. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was the question?
Sure. Kalijah says, how do you recommend getting minorities involved to advocate and represent their community?
Okay, I'm sorry. It's those trusted organizations that are doing the work, that are on the ground, being that translator, that are being that messenger. You know, it's tough because I work a lot with public housing residents, and so when you have, you know, the city, you know, saying, well, why don't they show up at our meetings? It's like, well, how many meetings do you show up in your community? None. It's like, well, then why are you expecting these individuals to have to go and advocate for themselves? It's just not meeting people where they're at. And it's very difficult. And I think we need to invest in community-based organizations, organizers. I think it's always going to be those relationships, those trusted individuals that can go into communities. And it's very much so these populations just don't have the trust of the system. You know, it's countless times of they've let me down. And this is where I kind of want to touch on the topic of the voting. Yeah, we can vote those elected officials, but we don't know the the backhand deals that they're making behind closed doors, you know, something. And that's another thing where they have to explain too, you know, okay, you know, we have to take this away from you in order for you to get the bigger piece of the pie. And so it's, in politics, it's always a give and take. And so, yeah, I would say it is electing those officials, but at the same time, that's why we need the community keeping them accountable. And again, how do we do that? You know, these are populations that have to, you know, think about, how am I going to put food on the table? How am I going to get to work? How am I going to do all these things? And you still want me to tell you what is wrong in my community? And that's where, like, you know, I think we really just need to listen to people and help them describe and think of solutions. So I'll pass it on to Gary.
I think building on that, it's also like accommodating ways in which people, like accommodating their lives and not making it a strict, you know, like we have public meetings or at this time, or we do this type of engagement. And no, you have to respond to the current realities that people are facing and what they're living. And so go, you know, just be creative in that aspect. And and especially now with the changing environments that we're living in with COVID and a pandemic, I think planners and transportation officials just have to be much more open to that. And I think I've seen dramatic change in transportation planning in Nashville over the last decade, just with a new generation of leaders coming on and a lot of retirement happening. So I think there are some opportunities that are happening with people at that level engaging that type of change.
And I think we should also be switching that sort of that paradigm. Like, it should be on us to be, as people who are getting paid to do this work, as so-called experts in our fields. I think community engagement, authentic community engagement, should be expected from us. And I think if we still see that as a burden or as something that is too difficult for us to do, I think that's a problem. And so before we sort of place the blame on people who don't have access to us, really, we have to be the ones to start taking responsibility and accountability for that.
I totally agree. Thanks, Amanda. Kelly, some final words. Maybe we can move on to another question. Up to you.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that everyone said. And I think some of the things that we've seen in Austin, where I'll give you a specific example. We sort of, as the equity office, we sort of get to indicate what we think makes sense and is going to cause harm, or if it might be something good for the community. And we ask really hard questions. And a lot of times we have politicians in office who have, 2,000 days to do this thing, and they're stuck on it regardless of what the community says, right? And right now we're in this tough situation where we need a new land development code. We're doing this huge cap and stitch. We're lowering our I-35, our main highway here. We're also about to do this thing called Project Connect that connects the airport to downtown. Well, they're thinking about it. We don't know if we're going to do it. There's a lot of money to be made, right? And at the same time, though, we have 12 schools were proposed to be closed, right? Where are those kids going to go? We have people experiencing homelessness. Over 42% of those folks are Black, and it's like these types of issues are, there's a racial wealth gap in our city that shows Black and brown folks were doing better in 1980. But we're building all this wealth in Austin that our folks don't have access to. And so I think that that we just need to be really careful, because think about what the experiment that the United States is really built on. It's stealing people land. That's what it is, right? And so how do we not keep reliving that every single time and thinking about transportation planning and thinking about land use planning, right? How do we reimagine that while we're reimagining policing and reimagining all these other things, how do we reimagine, how do we see what it is that we want to build, right? And if we don't have that sort of in our mind's eye, then I think we're sort of perpetuating white supremacy and colonization and all of the things.
Great.
That's harsh, but that's what I think.
Well, thank you for that perspective. Yeah, it's not like it's unique to your city. I mean, we like you said, we experienced it all over the country. Thank you for that. We've got a question here from Elise, another gentrification question. How do you reduce gentrification, especially since people of color aren't traditionally owners of their own home? So we talked a little bit about that, but for some more comments on it, maybe Gary?
I have a lot of ideas. I wish we could implement them or could have happened, but I mean, support of, so I guess a couple issues, people who own their own homes and people maybe who are renting in communities, but supporting local neighborhoods that are still vibrant and intact in the cities that we're in. And so in Nashville, North Nashville is a neighborhood that's historically Black, African-American, has a very vibrant history. I saw a question earlier from somebody about the history of Jefferson Street. That was a community that was really devastated by the construction of the interstate highway system that basically, completely devastated, tore down, I believe, like 1,500 houses, over 100 square blocks to build the interstate there. But persisted and still exists. But literally, you drive through the community, it's a large area. There's like a new tear down every day and a new, crazy new house being built. What is the action the city can take to go in and work with community leaders, work with people who own there, work with people who rent there, to support them and to allow the support and not displacement of those residents and community members? And I think a lot of times what happens, and I think I saw this also as a question, is people, I think in some reasons, are moving out because they don't see that support or that interest or recognition from the leaders of the city that this is your community. We're here for you. How can we support you? We want you to stay. This is where you belong, if you want to. But it's more like an individual one-on-one basis if you're not hearing that support from your community. And so, yes, of course, you may want to leave. You might not really want to, but that's the only option to if you're not given or don't see that support from the city. So I don't know. It's really difficult, but I think there's a few innovative type of ways in which we can be anti-displacement gentrification, looking at new planning policies that allow for different types of housing, whether it's a detached accessible dwelling units for people who own their houses, where there can be support for them building that and bringing in the income to their household, and also supply affordable housing to others that might not have access to it. Obviously, home renovation and update programs that can save costs for homeowners, policies that don't allow you to evict, or how can you keep existing rental units in play. I think the biggest issue is just how do we retain the existing affordable housing we have, because you just can't build enough. Like, it's the way that we're structured right now. We as a city of Nashville are building, maybe 500 units a year or 1,000. The gap is like 30,000 units that are needed to be built. And I think this is we're smaller than Phoenix and Austin. So it's huge. So how do we keep people where they are right now without losing? And then how do we start to go back and really do quality, affordable and workforce housing to, replace what we've lost? I think that's the immediate steps.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I agree. I think if there were a manual on how cities could be city planning departments can have a stronger backbone and not caving to developer rights to protect folks' rights and properties. I think Nashville should read it. Thank you all for that perspective. I know we could probably talk about this topic all night, but maybe we can move on to some other folks who are eagerly asking our panelists some questions. Brad asked, as someone who moved to Austin 6 years ago, I don't know as much about Austin's history as I'd like to. This question's for Kelly or Amanda. Do you by chance have any recommendations on ways to learn more about Austin's history? Any recommended books? Guys, I'm sure you do. Perhaps at the end when we distribute y'all's contact information, you can maybe individually connect with Brad. I think that might be great. Thanks very much, Brad. And I'm sorry to skip over you, but let's have our panelists follow up with you after the presentation. Jody asked, what best practices have you seen attracts a diverse population to live, work, and play in your cities? Jody, that's a fabulous question. Jessica, would you like to start off with that? I'll read it again. What best practices have you seen attracts a diverse population to live, work, and play?
I don't think I've seen any best practices. I think it's just been the reality of the market of affordability. People will go where it's affordable for them to live. And unfortunately, those aren't the circumstances that are taken into consideration when we're implementing the need for residents.
Yeah, great. That's good. Kelly or Amanda?
Yeah, I mean, I think we already have that diversity in our communities of color. It's about what white folks think about that. And I think a lot of people frame that question as, well, this is a white community, how do we make it more diverse? And I think that, I mean, that's part of the problem. So.
Yeah, I think it's less about having diverse communities because I think sometimes diversity is sort of the easy way to go, right? And what people are comfortable with. That's sort of how I understand diversity. Like in schools, I'll hear parents say, "Well, it's diverse, right? We wanted a diverse school," and that's like a signal for sometimes just enough people of color, right? Not too many. You rarely see, white folks taking and enrolling their kids in the all black school in the community, right? And so I think I think that it's nice to think about sort of this integrated sort of neighborhood where you have some of everybody. But until we sort of really interrogate the history and deal with these banks and lending practices, deal with some of these sort of, I think, larger institutional barriers for things like that, we'll stay stuck. There's a neighborhood here in Austin that was supposed to be like affordable housing. It's where our old airport used to be. It's called Miller, but I call it Mueller because that's how it's spelled. People get irritated about that. And it was supposed to be, a way for people to have access to affordable housing. And there were all these agreements made. It's super white, and there's a lot of money there, and you have workforce housing that's 120% MFI for a city where the median family income for a family of four is like $80,000. That's a lot of money compared to, the 40% of our city that makes less than 60,000 a year, and really a big chunk make less than 30% MFI, right? And those are the people that need housing, not these people that have options and money, who have cars and stuff that can drive in and out of the city. That's not who we should be prioritizing. So it's like this. A lot of times I think what we do is try to smash a square peg into a round hole, when we really just need to sort of start over, so that there aren't the same type of barriers, right, that have created the outcomes that we see now. I feel like the thing around home loans and and all that stuff and the 620 credit score, don't get me started. Because if your last name sounds ethnic, it's been researched over and over again. If they take off 90 to like 150 points, they treat your credit score that way, right? So I could have, you know, a 720 credit score, but they're going to treat it like it's 5 something because my name sounds black or my name sounds Latino. That's the hustle right there. Again, the financial systems, the money sort of undercutting that. I think too, people want to run to culture, right? I would recommend everyone in this room attend a workshop by the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond called Undoing Racism. And they do a lot of work around it's a community organizing training, but what it does is it contextualizes race and racism within history, and it helps white folks, I think, understand how racism impacts them as well as it does for people of color, right? And it gets to this question around culture. You know, a lot of the pushback we got around saying gentrification is bad is like, well, we're just creating diversity, we're desegregating the east side. And it's like, is that what you're doing, right? Like it creates a way and a shared language to be able to talk about this stuff and share experiences around it, because I think that's the piece, right? Are the relationships and not, I don't want to live somewhere where I'm scared my kids are going to get the police called on them, where I'm watching my neighbors or they're watching me. I mean, just look at next door in some of these neighborhoods. Y'all know what I'm talking about. So yeah, that's what I got. I talk too much. I'm sorry, y'all.
No, not at all. Thank you for that perspective. And these aren't unique issues to your community either. I mean, they're happening everywhere. Thank you for that. And Gary, I want to hear what you have to say, but I really like this next question from Sandra. This is a question that uh, planners every day face. How do we get people to tell you what they think or want? How do we? I mean, getting public participation is so hard. We want to do a good job, but what are some things we can remember right now that we can all take home, assuming we have some planners on? How do we get those? How do we get that feedback? Gary, would you like to start there?
I may use a phone a friend on. Oh. So, well, I mean, I think people are going to tell you what they want if you ask them in a honest way and approach them in a open and in a truly communicative aspect. So if you're using what we've talked about on this meeting and you're outreaching, I think people will tell you what they want. And I think what you'll hear from them is,
how do you do that? So is it,
how do you do it?
Is it
Yeah.
the organizing? Do we all meet at the library? Or what is it to you?
Well, I think it goes back to, I mean, and this is my phone. Literally, I did ask a friend to help me with this, who's in Nashville City Metro Planning Department government, Stephanie McCullough, who used to work with us at the Civic Design Center for many years. But there obviously is a distrust of government that is rooted in everything that we've talked about. So seeing that cities are starting equity offices and addressing that in a way, I think is an absolute pivotal stance. If somebody's city doesn't have something like that, they should be advocating for it. And a team within the planning profession and all departments probably that are having these conversations. Again, we talked already about the diversity of ways in which to engage with people. Don't just utilize the standard, meeting after work or whatever. Try to engage people in a lot of diverse ways. We have youth engagement happening in schools, so we're talking a lot we have a youth education program, 7th and 8th grade, middle schools, but I think there's just so many ways that you can talk to people and get it. So it's just not limiting yourself to the things that we've done historically.
Thanks. Jessica, Phoenix Community Response.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback that, for Phoenix Revitalization Corporation, we have our trusted community advisors and they get paid for their time. paying these people to advocate for themselves is crucial. You don't know how much time they're dedicating to attend these community meetings. You don't know the situation that they're leaving at home to attend these meetings. So it's very important that you respect their time, you feed them at these meetings, and then you also, allocate funds for their time. And that's how you will get, true outreach, true involvement, because you're showing that you value their time and you value their input. So I think it goes twofold. Like, you need to show that you're making the investment first before people want to come and trust you and tell you all their life problems. Because I mean, once you open that Pandora's box, like, it's not going to stop coming. So again, like, how are you going to respond to that? It's quite a challenge, and that's what I can offer, is just value these people.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jessica. Kelly and Amanda, especially in the COVID times right now, really engaging people virtually. Does that play any in your response here?
I mean, we've been trying. I still think that it's not enough, the virtual stuff, because we have the digital divide. Our people are not connected to the internet. We have elders who are really isolated. Our office is still doing a lot of work on the COVID response. We just had folks come in from the hurricane here who have been bussed in here. We're dealing with this stuff around policing too. And so I think it's really hard to engage folks in this moment. And so we're calling people, checking on people, trying to make sure, that folks have what they need. And I'm going to quote my boss. Amanda, don't laugh at me. But our boss, Brian, always says, people don't care what you know until they know you care. And I think that's the crucial piece, right? And people want to be respected, right? Like, I think it's never good to come in and think you're the expert on something and not be able to listen, right? Communities are experts on themselves, and the onus should be on us to be able to hear, right? That's the thing. We haven't developed the ear to really understand community, right? We think they're going to come in with their PowerPoint presentation and have a 10-point plan to get it all done, right? No, that's not how it works. People tell stories, people share experiences, and we have to be able to extract what the issue is from that. And we don't know the institution has never been able to do that well until it started to get, I think, more community folks in there. And that's the only way that this stuff changes, is inside, outside, and mostly outside pushing, right? So I think, yeah, I think the virtual stuff has been killing me. I mean, we can't even hug each other right now. Like, I'm so happy to be here with y'all right now because we get to see people. It's been rough.
Yeah, I was thinking about how, again, kind of going back to this idea that this co-creative process of working with community is paramount, and it should be looked at as a privilege and not a chore. And so it does take a lot of work on our part. I was just sort of thinking about, Kelly, like, we held a multilingual virtual event on Zoom with over 300 people participating. But that was a lot more work than it would be to do it in person, because kind of working out that simultaneous interpretation and then really centering language justice is, it's really, really difficult. And so we had bi-directional interpretation, and I think that was the first of its kind that the city had ever done. And so I think it takes, now being in this new normal, it's going to take more of that, sort of normalizing what that really looks like and how we can get our technology to start adapting to what our needs are.
It's slow too, right? Like, it's not anything. I think that's the piece too, is that people are used to microwave yoga, but it has to be slow. How many languages? I mean, which languages did we have?
Yeah, so the initial idea was to do the top 5 languages that we have speakers in the city. We weren't exactly able to do that. We did have 5 languages total. So English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Arabic, and Burmese. And so, yeah, so we had to coordinate all of that stuff. And if anyone's trying to plan anything like that, you should definitely reach out to us, because we now have like a like what to do. Yeah.
Thanks, Amanda and Kelly. Great perspectives. I'm sure you'll be getting some emails soon. That can transition actually into a good question. I want to be aware of time. It is 6:20 now Central, and we're coming up on an hour and a half, and I want our panelists to be able to get back to their homes and families and have dinner, of course. So I'm not going to be making any friends by ending this with our 45 message queue in our chat box right now, but it's not a terrible problem to have. If we could start with Gary with this next one, and maybe have this be the last formal question before we end tonight. And don't worry, attendees, I've got a record of all of our chats that you put in the box, and this session will be recorded and distributed for your viewing, of course, for those who couldn't attend tonight. But on this more public engagement side, when we leave today, I like ending webinars with this question a lot. Right when we close the laptop and we go back to our lives and our jobs and everything, I mean, what are and I say on the ground, it could be a virtual perspective too, but what are some things that we can do physically, like things that we can do ourselves on the personal level, on the one-on-one level, to really engage in our communities a lot better? We want to be able to improve our behaviors, live more open-mindedly, and really contribute to a more equitable society. I mean, that's the whole panel discussion title, right? What are things you and me can do the next time we're at a meeting, or maybe we don't have planners on here? What's something that you would say to them who don't have a background in planning or even community engagement? What is something you would say that would try to make them think differently in maybe CBS News 25 words or less from your perspective? I know that's a big question, and it's a tough question, but it's a really important one. Gary, if you're ready, you can of course tackle it, or I'm going to let you guys kind of get that last question.
Well, I think with what we've experienced in the last 6 to 8 months as a country, we have to, as individuals, really reflect on our own lives and understand, like, where are we as an individual? Who am I? What have I gone through in life? And have understanding of that, and then have a connection to what other people's experiences are. And that is just a step that you need to take. And I think that'll help you better than be open to the learning of other people's stories and lives. And I would just say, I think everybody probably on this meeting call and attendance here is here because they're interested in this topic. But that even was for me, it's like, I've been engaged in this, but sometimes you don't know what to do. You might be confused about what you can ask somebody else, or what group you can actually participate in or become involved with. So I would say, make those efforts to, if you don't understand or don't know, ask the questions, what your passion is, how you can get involved, what we talked about earlier with looking at the organizations that are doing work to promote what we've been talking about, and absolutely get involved. I think getting involved on every single level possible, from grassroots at the bottom, grassroots level, to community, neighborhood, other organizations, voting, everything. And also really try to go outside of your silo or your bubble of social connectivity that you've been in. Because I think that's what, we're in communities, whether it's your close friends or your work colleagues, but try to challenge yourself to get outside of that and get these different voices and opinions and perspectives into your life, and let that propel you forward.
Thank you, Gary. Jessica, what does it look like on your end?
It looks like, meeting people where they are. I think planners sometimes don't understand where people are coming from. And so I would encourage, planners to come in a sense of trying to question to understand instead of questioning to correct. So it's very important to trust those individuals that are pointing out the inequality that is occurring in their community, and instead of trying to correct, but this happened and that was supposed to help, and it's just like, no, believe that person and their experience. And then also in community engagement, when someone has the courage to say or ask a question and you see that it's not getting answered, be an ally and be like, hey, can you answer that person's question? Or just reaffirm that person was heard. It goes a long way. And I think that's what, in society, we just need to show each other that we are here to support one another, whether we understand or agree. That person had the courage enough to say, I see a problem and I want it addressed. And then everybody else in the room is like, well, we don't agree. That doesn't feel good. That helps, that leads people to not want to participate ever. So I think it needs to be more of encouragement, trust, and support.
Thanks, Jessica. I really like that. Questioning to understand, not questioning to correct. Very important. Kelly and Amanda, some final thoughts.
Yeah, I was thinking about how important it is to give each other grace right now, how difficult this is, and especially, it's really hard for everyone, but people of color, Black people are feeling it especially hard right now. And I think it's important to develop those one-on-one relationships, but also not to put all of that onto your BIPOC folks to educate you. Take initiative and educate yourselves. And I'm saying that to mostly white folks. And don't tokenize anybody. And get your white folks and talk to them. And Kelly always says that we don't necessarily need allies, we need co-conspirators to step out and take on what maybe we can't take on sometimes.
Wow. What I would tell people is to build relationships and build accountable, reciprocal relationships. People, if we can be consistent and honest, I think that goes a long way. And sometimes we have to say things that we don't want to, but we have to be real, right? I think that's a form of respect. And I think that's another piece, is that we've been very disrespectful to the communities that we built our cities on. Jessica alluded to it early on. The only reason we're able to be at home on our computers right now is because of our folks that's out there working outside, right? Those are the people that are putting their lives at risk because they have to go to work, but also that creates a space for us to be comfortable and be able to be at home, And I think starting to, like Gary said, acknowledge that and have an understanding of who we are and really our orientation to power, right? To institutional power, and who are we? What kind of gatekeeper are we going to be? Are we going to be the gatekeeper that gives the little community over here that might be facing a big time development that ain't going to benefit them? Are we going to give them the tea, or are we going to keep them out and continue to sort of go business as usual, right? Or even for people who aren't in this space, how do you utilize the position and the role you're in? Because everybody's a gatekeeper. How do you share information and resources? We can be strategic about those things, and we can do it in a way that is in alignment and can be co-conspiratory, right, to this larger movement. So
Absolutely. I like the colorful use of word co-conspirator. I think it's a certain level of knowledge, and also tenacity that we really need in affecting change. Absolutely. Well, listen, guys, I got to say, it's been a great talk. We really have to wrap things up. I want to be respectful to all of our panelists for their time tonight. To all of our attendees, thank you so much for joining. I know we've got hundreds, what looks like messages in the chat box, but rest assured, I've taken note of all of them, and I'm going to be, actually, if you give me one moment, I'm going to share my screen. And if you could, if you're still on the call, these are the email addresses of our panelists tonight, if you want to screenshot it or write it down. And I want to thank all of you, Kelly, Amanda, Gary, and Jessica, so much for your words of serious wisdom. Thank you. And also to our YPT chapters in Phoenix and Austin and Nashville for connecting us with you tonight. We met as strangers a few months ago, and now here we are tonight. We've come a long way. So thank you all so much. I will figure out a way to distribute this recording when we end tonight. And
hey, Ian, I have one final request from
Yes,
Nashville. If we could do a group shot of all our panelists so we could share that on social media in some way.
I love it. I love it.
Where everybody's smiling, and I can do one from here, but if you can do one too.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Panelists, if you wouldn't mind, let's do it on 3. 1, 2, 3. Great. Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, please tell everyone how much you enjoyed this evening. If you need to reach out to me for contact information for any of our speakers tonight, feel free to do that, and we will certainly follow up with you on. And maybe you'll even get an answer to one of the 40 questions that we didn't get to tonight. So thank you all for your time. It was a huge night for an hour and a half. So with that, I will say good night to everyone, and everyone have a great rest of the week. Thank you.